Welcome one more time to Brainwaves and Beyond. Last program we discovered that the teen brain is a triune brain. It has three parts, remember? The reptilian, the limbic and the neocortex, which is the rational part. We said that this part is the filter that stops, in a way, what comes from the reptilian and limbic brain. It regulates what the brain is producing, and as we grow older, the prefrontal cortex dominates. The thing is, this part is developed through adolescence, so teens don't have the capacity to regulate their instinctual and emotional brain. This means that we, adults, need to be the neocortex to filter adolescents' reactions. How do we do this? Well, I have here with me today two specialists in the field of education and adolescence, and they are also teachers. Yes, they are in the hot zone of adolescence, and they know better than anyone that adolescent fever is contagious, and we may easily get involved in their drama. Welcome, Dr. Jazmin Williams and Dr. Lucy Johnson.
Thank you for having us here today. Yes, as you said, we teachers are vulnerable to the adolescent fever, and it may deviate us from our road. We sometimes feel out of control, and that's why we need to deconstruct our way of behaving with adolescents by developing certain skills that help us to behave as grown-ups, to guide them to deal with their developing brains.
Oh, that's very interesting. What is to be a grown-up? We are all adults. I assume we are all grown-ups. Isn't it the same?
Well, certainly not. We are adults, for sure, but not all of us behave as grown-ups, and it is not even necessary in every job. But if you're a teacher, you need to be a grown-up. First of all, it's important to know ourselves, to do an internal psychological work to understand our features, such as our feelings, our behavior, and our values and beliefs. Remember that adolescents are just discovering themselves. So how are we going to help them with that process if we haven't discovered ourselves? It's crucial to have an objective view of us. Once we have developed our self-awareness, we can practice our self-control. As lack of impulse control is a characteristic of teenagers, we are obliged to monitor and control our own. Unless we can master this skill, there's little hope we can help teenagers rein themselves in.
Oh, I find that point interesting because I believe that adolescents being unable to control their impulses is one of the main reasons why some teachers find it hard to work with them.
Yes, it is true that conflict is a current issue when working with teens. Their impulses combined with their bad decision making makes it a hot pot difficult to handle. However, we need to bear in mind they don't do it on purpose. It's just their brains still developing. Therefore, teens need grown-up teachers who can tolerate and deal with their conflicts by making use of their good judgment, in order to help them make the reasoning and find the solutions they can't by themselves. The mastery of these skills is quite challenging, we cannot deny it, but they are a must.
What can you tell me about how to build a relationship with them? Because it is also a shared fear among new teachers of adolescents.
That's a very important question. First of all, let's not forget that our relationship with them will never be symmetric. They cannot see us as peers. We must build boundaries, so sharing personal information with the students is never a good choice. Besides, remember they are not really interested in us. Teenagers are famous for their self-absorption, so those of us who work with them can't be. These are what we call the skills of self-transcendence, not taking everything personal and placing the students first, and the ability to maintain boundaries. We can also add one more, the long life learning, which is basically the capacity of being constantly evolving and learning how to master these skills. We cannot master all of them all the time, but we can work on and improve them during our whole life.
So, you've just mentioned the skills that we must master as teachers to fulfill our grown up role in the classroom. Now, how do we apply them in the hot zone? What's the recipe for healthy interactions with the students?
Well, certainly there's no recipe in the hot zone. You need to constantly evaluate yourself, but the bottom line is that adolescents need adults to be grown ups. There are certain things, let's say, that teachers can do for adolescents that they need from us. I mean, our job in the teenage world is to meet our students' needs and not necessarily their wants. Since they can't discern, we are the ones who have to develop a good judgment to distinguish their needs from their wants, because they are not always the same. We must fulfill what's essential for them at school to learn, to be safe, and to make sure that they are understood in a developmentally appropriate manner. Of course, the denying their wants may lead to conflict sometimes, because what they want is not always what they need. So we have to keep an eye on boundaries and know how to deal with conflicts efficiently.
Well, conflicts are terrible, right? How do we deal with conflicts efficiently?
That's a difficult question to answer. Teenagers don't have the brain power to control themselves, but we do. So they need us to respond differently than they do. So an appropriate response to conflict is never a reactive one. If we react, then we'll be behaving like they do, and that's not what they need at all. They need us to respond, to approach situations in a reasoned manner, and to exercise our impulse control that we were previously talking about. Sometimes all that's needed is a disinterested response instead of just jumping to conclusions. What adolescents need from adults is to be surrounded by grown ups who can relate to them but not identify with them. So if we start to think and act in the same way that they do, then we are not helping them. We do help them by relating with them and being empathic, but always keeping our own perspective. So, in this way, I think that we can connect to them and deal with their conflicts in a grown up way.
Connecting with teenagers, it's a big deal. Is it a question of age?
No, I don't think so. We just need to maintain good boundaries in order not to identify with them. Besides, it's fundamental to keep in mind that we can have empathy and be friendly with students without necessarily being their friends. The teacher student relationship is power differential. It always is, so it's always asymmetric. This means that reciprocity cannot exist and we cannot be friends under any circumstance. I think that as teachers we need to be aware of this. I know that sometimes it's difficult, but a good advice here is to have a good relationships among teachers so that we won't look for students for companionship. I think it all comes down to the fact that teachers have to prioritize students' needs over their own. This is the self-transcendence skill that we were previously talking about. We are models for teenagers, and you should always ask yourself the question, who does this serve? And the answer should always be students. It's a paradox, though. In order to put students first, we must take care of ourselves. We have to strike a certain balance between serving the other and serving the self.
You talked about good relationships among teachers. Is it really important?
Of course it is. Helping our students is a collaborative effort in schools. We need to work with our colleagues, not against them.
Finally, it's worth mentioning the yes and no's when teaching adolescents. Dr. Williams, if you have to name the top three do's, which ones would you choose?
It is a hard question. There are too many points to take into consideration. But I would say first, do understand and follow school policies, procedures, and best practices. I want to emphasize the importance of following the rules and the school guidelines within the school community. Collaborating with students, educators, and other members of the school is crucial in creating a safe learning environment. Then, do establish strong ties with colleagues. We need allies and grown-ups to seek advice and help. And last but not least, do get a life. It helps you differentiate your personal life from your work as an educator. It gives you perspective.
Interesting. And what about the don'ts, Dr. Johnson? Which ones would you mention?
Well, this is interesting. I would like educators to keep in mind the following statement. Don't do anything you wouldn't want your principal to know about. We need to consider the acts we perform by standing in the perspective of our principals. Ask yourself these questions. Do I want my principal to see this situation or to listen to this conversation? It is a good guide for new teachers.
Thank you so much to our guests, Dr. Williams and Dr. Johnson, for sharing your expertise and insights on teaching adolescents. Your perspectives have light on important aspects of education, and I'm sure our listeners have gained valuable knowledge from our conversation. Remember, listeners, you can find more resources and information related to today's topic on our website. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, keep learning and growing. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.